falls asleep every day.
Okay, guys, like I said, if you took a microscope and looked at the layers of your skin, this is what you would see. Ugh. You know, ugh. Now, when we think of skin, though, we think of just a bunch of dead cells. And that's only this top layer up here. Only the top layer of your skin is actually dead. And it is dead. Those cells are dead, long gone. Okay, but that's you know, there's more to your integumentary system. When skin is really just part of it. That's kind of what skin is. Okay. Boy, it's a mess. It's a mess, but in a good way. 3 major layers. The epidermis is the one that's on the surface. That's the one you guys are familiar with. The epidermis contains mostly dead cells. But here's the funny thing. The epidermis kind of starts from here to here. Now, what I want you to kind of look at is this layer of kind of purple cells right down here. That's the bottom layer of your epidermis. Those cells are very much alive. Those cells are actually stem cells. And if you guys remember what stem cells are, those are the cells that give rise to new cells. There's a whole lot of division, cell division going on right there, producing all these new, good, juicy skin cells that are going to be slowly making a migration up toward the surface of your skin. Your skin cells are constantly regenerating themselves. I should say just the ones of the epidermis. They're constantly making more because every day when I do this, I'm losing millions of cells just by doing that. You are constantly losing cells all the time. So if you didn't have a way to make more of them, you'd be in trouble. You'd be in trouble. But the cells down here start off very much alive. I think that's why they have them kind of purplish right here. These cells start off very much alive, and they get pushed closer to the surface. Well, as they make that little voyage to the surface, they die. They die slowly. But it makes sense why they die slowly. There are no blood vessels or anything up there nourishing those cells. Of course they're going to die. Okay, all those blood vessels are down here. We'll get to that in a minute. But the cells are made, pushed forward, and as they migrate, and it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for cells here to come up to here, and as they migrate, they die. Okay. In the meantime, though, while they're making their trip of death, I should say, they actually are pumping out some proteins while they're still alive, because remember, cells are protein factories. They're pumping out some proteins. They're pumping out a protein called keratin. In fact, I think there's like lotions named after it. If you go to the store and look down the lotion aisle, you'll probably see some like word that has to do with keratin that they've turned the lotion name into. That protein is important because that protein is what makes skin pretty tough. I mean, this is pretty tough. You know, you don't want skin that's going to rip apart at the first kind of touch to it. So it's pretty tough, and it's pretty waterproof. So you want to have a waterproofing action in your skin, and you also want it to be tough. Anyway, epidermis. Dermis. That's where all the stuff is. Big area. This is where you will find blood vessels. These little yellow things are nerves. This thing right here is like a smooth muscle. The smooth muscle is hooked up to a hair. What happens when this muscle contracts? Goosebump. Okay, so you have a muscle hooked up to a hair, and it can move the hair when it needs to control temperature. We'll get to that in a minute. You also have these glands that I'm going to talk about in your notes too, these sebaceous glands, and they usually surround the hair follicle. Okay, so you have a lot going on in the dermis. There is a lot of junk there. There's a lot of stuff there. It's very much alive. It's very much living. I mean, this is, you know, but when you get poked, you know, if it was just on your epidermis, you really wouldn't feel it. You really have to kind of, you know, experience pain. If you get a cut, that means that you're cutting into your dermis layer. Okay, the third layer is kind of boring. Down here, it's called, now I read the hypo. Hypo means under, hypodermis, so it's the layer that's furthest underneath. Fat. You know, fat is not a bad thing. You need fat in certain parts of your body in certain quantities. This third layer has, I mean, all those little yellow blobs are blobs of fat. But insulation. You guys heard of like walruses and seals contain a really thick layer of fat to keep warm. Well, to be honest, we kind of do too. We have a layer of fat surrounding all of it in our skin. So a lot going on here. Like I said, what I want to do now is go into a little more detail about each of these 3 layers. We'll throw out some fun facts for you about your skin. We'll talk a little bit about acne and things like that. So it's actually, you know, kind of an informative session. So questions so far? All right. I'm going to try to get a copy of this picture for everybody. Actually, the same picture is in your book, so you should be able to see it there. All right, let's get this. Let's start and finish. All right, again, it's called the integumentary system. I know that's a strange name for a system like this. Integumentary. And skin, like the outer part of your skin, is only part of it. So it consists of your skin, of your hair. We saw hair follicles in there. We saw glands in there, and I'll tell you what those glands do in a minute. But even your nails are part of this. I think those are kind of the biggies. Okay. Even, you know, blood vessels and nerves I could throw in there, but those are the main ones. Now, when it comes to the functions of your integumentary system, there is as follows. Some of them you could probably figure out, but protection is one. Without your skin, you would get sick a lot more often. Your skin acts like a physical barrier. It protects you from things like pathogens. Pathogens, remember, is just a general name for any kind of virus or bacteria that's going to get you sick. There seems to be a ton of people going home sick today. So I know my kid was kind of thrown up all weekend too, and I think I hear that something's going around. Okay, but anyway, that's pathogens. Usually it's a bacteria or virus that gets inside of you. But your skin, believe it or not, you don't think of it this way, really does protect you from, it provides an actual physical barrier. However, UV rays, your skin has a built-in suntan lotion. And we'll talk about that here in a minute too. So really, your integumentary system protects you from more than you think. So that's one kind of job. Your skin also does a really good job of regulating body temperature. Remember, that's one of those things that's really important for us to do. We got to make sure that our body temperatures remain stable and constant in the same temperature. Your integumentary system with that layer of fat really does a good job of doing that. It does some other cool things like, well, you know what, let me write this down. I'll say, you know, the fat layer has a really good job of doing that. Plus your skin has the ability to generate goosebumps. And believe it or not, goosebumps, as we'll talk about, do a good job with controlling temperature regulation. Believe it or not, your skin is considered almost like an excretory organ. Don't think you just pee and that to get everything bad out of you. A lot of waste products actually are removed from your skin. You have a certain amount of urea and salts that actually leave your body through your skin. If you guys know anything about urea, you see a lot of urea in your urine. So the other class was like, what are you talking about? Our sweat is the same as our pee? And I'm like, kinda. Yeah. A little different, but yeah, if you actually did like a kind of a chemical analysis of your sweat and your pee, you wouldn't see a whole lot different. Okay, isn't the human body lovely? Okay, your skin actually produces something called vitamin D. Vitamin D. Your skin makes a vitamin. Isn't that weird? Actually, your skin, with the help of the sun, I'll put plus sun, makes vitamin D. They actually say that it's probably kind of healthy for you to go out into the sun for like 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day. I realize in Ohio that's hard to do. But actually, being in the sun, whether it's summer or winter, doesn't matter, helps your body to make vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is needed. vitamin D is actually needed. Now, bear with me, this is a little complicated. You will not be able to absorption. You would not be able to, let me say this again. Your digestive system would not be able to absorb calcium from like the milk you drink if you didn't have vitamin D attached along with it. This is weird. It's funny. Calcium is needed in your body. You got to have calcium for, actually we even talked the other day how calcium is needed for the nerve to make a connection with the muscle. You got to have calcium there or else you're not going to, that nerve's not going to be able to communicate with your muscle. Like you wouldn't be able to move things. Anyway, but in order for calcium to get absorbed from the foods you eat, it won't do it if you don't have vitamin D along with it. If you took calcium tablets, you can go to the store and get calcium tablets, but if you never had any vitamin D to go along with it, you would just pee it out. It would do no good. It wouldn't get absorbed by your intestines. So vitamin D and calcium go together. If you actually look on the side, though, of a milk carton, a lot of times, and milk has calcium in it, that's a given, but a lot of times the milk companies will actually fortify it with vitamin D. When you hear the words fortified, you see that on cereal boxes a lot too. When you hear the word fortified, that basically means they kind of add it on the side. They basically kind of throw it in as like a add-on. It's not a natural part of like the substance. Like cereal, for example. You see the commercials, especially the little kid commercials, where they have this cereal. And cereal's made from grain, okay? But then they say it's fortified with 24 vitamins and minerals. That just means, fortified means is they just add it. They add it because it doesn't come naturally with the cereal. So just like in the side of the milk carton, see if you can see, usually they have milk and it says fortified with vitamin D. That means they throw it along with it because it's no good drinking milk if you don't have vitamin D to go along with it. Or you can just sit in the sun. That's much more fun. But then you have to worry about cancer if you do it too much. So, okay, guys, layers of the skin. Let me give a few words about these. You saw them in the picture. The first outermost layer is called the epidermis. Epidermis. Okay, again, what I kind of want you to know about that is at the bottom of the epidermis, you have this layer of cells called stem cells. And they are going to be popping out new skin cells, and those skin cells are going to make a trip to the surface of your skin, and by the time they get to the surface of your skin, they're dead. But as they make that 4 to 6 week journey, they are producing a substance called keratin, K-E-R-A-T-I-N, and that keratin is a protein, because remember, cells are like protein factories, and that keratin protein is very tough. It's very rigid. That's what makes, I guess, like I said, otherwise my skin, just by touching it, would split open if it didn't have this keratin in it. You want keratin in your skin. Cool. So that's actually one thing. Other questions so far? I'm kind of going kind of fast. I realize that. So it's kind of neat to see that skin cells are they're so alive. There's, in a way, until they reach the surface. But they're basically just replacing themselves every 4 to 6 weeks. Every 4 to 6 weeks, you have a brand new layer of epidermis. Pretty cool. Hey, in your epidermis, you have another type of cell that's kind of buried in there. It's called a melanocyte. Again, anytime you see the word CYT, it's a cell type. This is a special cell, and this cell makes a really cool substance called a cell that makes melanin. Kind of goes together. Okay, melanin. Melanin is a substance that is like suntan lotion. It has a job of basically blocking out a lot of UV rays. It's suntan lotion. It's natural suntan lotion, melanin. This is also what makes people's skin color different from each other. Okay, so you got white people, you got black people, you got Hispanic people, you got Asian people. What makes each of these races different from each other is the amount of melanin that people produce. And it's genetic. It's written in your DNA as to how much melanin you're creating. Everybody, all humans pretty much have the same number of melanocytes in their epidermis. So they have the same number, more or less, of melanocytes. But various factors determine how much melanin those melanocytes pump out. And like I said, people with darker skin, they're just producing a lot more of this melanin than others. Everybody's making it. This is also what makes hair color different, eye color different, or is the amount of this melanin. So it's like instant suntan lotion. Okay. What else? Questions? All right. Almost done. Number 2. So epidermis, I think we've covered the 2 main parts about that. Number 2, you have your dermis. Again, guys, this is where you are going to see the blood vessels. You are going to see nerves. You are going to see glands. By the way, I want you to know the actual name of the gland. They're called sebaceous glands. Those sebaceous glands are going to make oil. You want oil. Actually, you can even feel it. If you guys actually, even your skin, you might not realize it, is very oiled naturally. You want that. You kind of want that oil on there. It does a couple of things. The sebaceous oil, let me kind of go into that. The sebaceous oil, or the sebaceous glands, I'm sorry, makes this oil. The oil's name is called sebum. It's kind of a weird name. So sebum is the actual name of the oil. This sebum does two things. It does waterproof your skin. Seriously, guys, if you didn't have sebum on your skin, and if you were not waterproofed like you are now, if you would take a shower or a bath or go in a swimming pool for like 3 seconds, you would come out and you'd be all like puffy. Well, you guys have been, if you've ever gone into like, a bathtub or a swimming pool for like hours or whatever, not like you've been in a bathtub for hours, but if you're in a swimming pool for like hours and you come out all pruny, that's what's happening to you. Basically, you've been in the waters for so long, what happens is water just starts accumulating under the surface of your skin and it causes that pruny look. But sebum, the substance we all have, actually is what prevents your day-to-day world from kind of, for you kind of being a constant prune, for walking around like a constant prune. So that's one job of the oil. It kind of acts like as a waterproofing layer. That sebum is actually also acidic in nature, and that actually does a little good job of killing some bacteria that decide to invade your skin. So that oil does a little bit of a job of helping with those pathogens, those bacteria. So, all right, so we got blood vessels, we got nerves, we got glands. Oops, I'm going to add up here. You got hair follicles, and you have muscle, smooth muscle. I think those are the biggies. Okay, I'm drawing pictures. This is going to be ugly. Dermis. I'm just going to draw a picture of the dermis. There you go. There's the dermal layer. I'm kind of going to try to draw a little bit of what you saw in the picture, but this is kind of important. Okay, so let's say I have a hair sticking out over here. That hair obviously is going to go into the epidermis layer, which is up here, okay, because we see it. The hair actually originates in the dermal layer, surrounding, and I should label this. They call it a hair follicle. Surrounding the hair follicle, you actually is where you're going to find these sebaceous glands. But it makes sense that the sebaceous glands would be kind of hugging the hair follicle. Because remember what the sebaceous glands do? They make this oil that needs to go to the surface. Well, the hair follicle kind of provides like a tunnel to get there. You know, the hair's got to extend out. It's like an opening. It's an easy opening for this oil that's being produced to come up here. Now, acne, okay? Acne is caused by basically you have an overproduction of these sebaceous glands making too much of this sebum. And hormones greatly impact that. That's one reason. Okay, but hormone levels like you have when you're teenagers greatly decide basically how active these glands are. So if these glands are pumping out some serious sebum, the sebum just kind of accumulates in this hair shaft follicle thing. And that's just going to provide a breeding. Well, that's why it kind of swells. But then that's going to just provide a total breeding ground for bacteria to kind of want to come in and munch on that oil, because that's what they do. Okay, so when you have acne, okay, is basically what it is. It's the accumulation of this oil, bacterial wastes, and it's kind of like a bunch of dead bacteria. And that's what pus is. Okay, so that's basically what you got there. So yay! All right. By the way, this hair follicle, also another kind of fun fact, there's also another thing connected to this hair follicle. You got yourself muscle. Now this is smooth muscle, and if you guys remember our talk from the other day, you can't control smooth muscle yourself. It's controlled by your nervous system. It's something else. But when that muscle contracts, you get a goosebump. The hair stands up, and you get a goosebump when that muscle contracts. Goosebumps are there for a reason. Think of it this way. Let's say I'm going to draw a line of an arm that does not have goosebumps in it. Let's say I'm drawing an arm of somebody who has goosebumps on it. Okay, my picture of a goosebump arm. Let's say over here, I pass a bunch of cold air over both of these different arms. Okay. If you're the top arm here, it's like standing in the middle of an open field on a cold, windy day. You're going to feel it. It's going to get really cold here. Goosebumps, though, if there's cold air passing over something like this, the cold air is going to basically, for the most part, stay above the ridges. So where I'm putting X's here is going to basically be air that's kind of basically stagnant, that's kind of gotten trapped in between these goosebumps. Well, that's a good thing. If air becomes trapped in these goosebumps, it's going to stay warm. That's warm air. So goosebumps are actually there to control your body's temperature. So they actually have a purpose. They're not just there to, for something to look at, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, we got our dermis, we got our epidermis, and like I said, the only other thing I want to talk about today is the hypodermis, and the only thing I'm really going to say about that, hypo means under, below. This is where you're going to find a lot of those fat cells, and again, remember these fat cells actually play a part in insulation. Okay. Disorders of your skin. We already kind of talked about acne. I won't go there unless you guys want me to, because it's actually interesting. Hives and cancer. These are kind of the big disorders when it comes to your skin. Acne, again, this is caused by typically bacteria that have infected your skin. They kind of like to concentrate themselves in an area where those sebaceous glands are at, but they don't have to. This is why they differ in color. If you guys have ever heard of like blackheads versus like regular old pimples, yeah, basically it has to do with the level of air that they're exposed to. So it's kind of interesting in that sense. But hives is totally different. Hives is actually an allergic reaction. Okay. Your skin knows you. And if basically some substance from the outside world decides to get on your skin, your body actually kind of sets into motion a series of reactions to try to get rid of it. That's what that's what allergic reaction is. Basically, signals are sent in your body that something that shouldn't be on your skin is on your skin. What happens is, one of the things that can happen is your body produces a substance called histamine. You might have heard something like this word. There's a substance that you naturally make called histamine. Histamine causes the areas where this happens to swell up. get red, maybe even make some gross things. You know, maybe even like, well, no, not in this case of hives. I don't know if you guys have ever seen what hives is. Hives is like your skin gets kind of patchy red and white.
My mom used this new lotion and she broke out in hives. Why did they give her steroids?
The steroids kind of act like an antihistamine. And that's the word that you guys might have heard of. When you go to the store, you get antihistamine. And it basically is there to kind of reduce the swelling. And that's very similar to what steroids do. They counteract the effect of histamine. But yeah, that's yep, very typical. When my kids get little rashes, like, because you guys all do, you know, get these like unknown rashes that come up time to time. Most of the time they're harmless. A lot of times I'll put a little hydrocortisone on it, which is like an antihistamine, and the swelling will go down, and it's like problem solved. Now, hives is a little different. My kid got it real bad. I don't know what she got into. Who knows? Probably licking a wall somewhere or something. Who knows? She's kind of like that, but she broke out all over, and it's not a bad thing. It's just one of those situations where your body's just reacting to something it shouldn't belong there. Produces a substance called histamine, causes things to swell, sends blood to the area because your blood contains a lot of white blood cells to try to fix it. And so that's kind of why you swell and get red kind of deal. So hives is another thing. Common but not deadly.
May I ask why your daughter licks walls?
She does. She's kind of the adventurous type. Yeah. She doesn't like walls. I was trying to make a joke to keep you guys awake.
Well.
All right, hey, cancer. We've already talked about cancer this year. Cancer's totally different. Cancer is where the DNA of just one cell becomes mutated, and if that DNA controls a gene that controls mitosis, and if you've just damaged that gene, it could result in cancer. Cancer, remember what cancer is, guys. All it is just a cell loses the ability to stop dividing, so all it does is divide and divide and divide and divide and divide. That's bad, because if it divides enough, it'll form a tumor. And what tumors do is block stuff. People with cancer actually, again, end up, becoming very sick because these tumors lodge themselves in places that can't be lodged. Maybe cutting off blood supply, cutting off a nerve ending. You can't do that. So cancer doesn't eat away at anything itself. Cancer is not a disease that eats away at something. It literally, it's just almost just the opposite. It forms basically mass of cells that interfere with proper function of organs. But cancer can develop in skin as well. In fact, I think it's like the most common form of cancer is skin cancer. If you get cancer in one of those melanocytes, those ones that make that melanin, that seems to be the most deadly form of skin cancer, because that's the kind of cancer that spreads really quickly when it hits one of those melanocytes. So yeah, that's why doctors say that as you age, or even anytime, if you notice like a skin marking that doesn't look right, or something that wasn't there a few months ago, and you notice this marking or mole or something that's there, you got to kind of get it looked at by a doctor, and they know right away if it's something that should be of a concern. Just for the record, usually what happens is you guys all have beauty marks. Everybody does. If they're nice and round, moles, beauty marks, markings, everybody has them. They're just a part. If they're nice and round, if they're round and of the same color, everybody's got them. The ones that the doctors get a little freaked out about are the ones that are kind of not round, they're kind of abnormal shaped, or their coloring is different from typical moles or beauty marks. That's when they kind of they'll do a test on it, or a biopsy, to see if it's something that should be removed. Because if skin cancer is caught soon enough, like all cancers, it can be removed and all is good. So, questions, guys? What?
Unless it comes back.
What comes back?
Cancer.
It only becomes a problem if it spreads. You know, if you can catch cancer soon enough before it has a chance to get into your bloodstream and spread, it's really you can eliminate cancer altogether. So it only becomes bad when it spreads to other parts, because then it can go anywhere. So that's when it can come back if it spreads. All right, guys, I have 10 minutes. Guess what? You have a worksheet that I gave you a few days ago. It's this one. I know you guys were